All right, we're going to be talking to talk about language development. So, although nature provides the foundation for language and cognitive development, so the vocal cords actually to being able to produce the language, nurture plays a critical role as well. There are four different stages in a baby's language development. The first stage is cooing, and it's the repetition of vowel sounds such as O or A. Then the next stage is the babbling stage, and it's basically taking the consonants of B, D, M, and G, and they're combined with different vowel sounds to produce meaningless language sounds. So da 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 or ba 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 ba. And those two stages are usually the same throughout the world, which illustrates more the nature element of language, right? However, then when we get into the single word stage, the parent's influence, the environment starts to have an influence. The babbling begins to sound more like the parent's language. So the single word stage would you actually hear the child would produce actually words from that language. So go, juice, up. And then the next stage is the telegraphic speech. So want teddy, mama gone, etc. I would like you to pause right now and check out the TED Talk about babies and language in different parts of the world. Alright, so now I thought it would be cool to kind of show you the different languages out of their English and kind of introduce you to them. So the first language is Hebrew, and Hebrew is written and read from right to left. So for example, this is Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Daled, Hey, etc. And those were the names of the letters. And the interesting things about the Hebrew alphabet, for example, is so for example, this kaf letter and this kaf are both the same, but the only difference is this letter, for example, appears at the end of the word. So if the kaf needs to come at the end of the word, you write it in this way. Same with like pay here, both of those. So now it would be an interesting exercise if you will repeat after me a few words and phrases. So you probably know the word shalom, which means hello. It also means peace. Another example probably you heard about is mazal tov. The way you will probably say it will be more like mazal tov, because that's how I usually hear it in American movies. But if you said it in the correct way, good job. Another example is ma nishma, which means how are you. I'm giving you extra pickup lines, just FYI. I'm just kidding. Another example for what is your name. So if you are asking a girl or if you're asking a boy, it's a little bit different. So איך קוראים לך is for a girl, but איך קוראים לך is for the guy. So the end of the last word, לך ולך, are a little bit different. So I've been learning Hebrew since I was around 3 years old when I moved to Israel in kindergarten and then in school. So and then obviously, completing all through like K to 12 in Hebrew. So I would say Hebrew is almost as a native language for me. But what would happen if right now you're trying to learn the language, and even though let's say you know all the letters, you know how to say theoretically all the words and everything, but you would still kind of have an accent, right? Let's try a different alphabet. So this is the Russian alphabet. And the Russian alphabet goes like the English one, so from left to right. And so A, B, V, G, D, etc. I heard that this is very confusing because this is a B in English and yet it's read like a V in Russian. Some words in Russian, привет, which means hello. It's always very interesting for me whenever they have in the movies, especially the action ones. For some reason, most of the time, the bad people, like I think in Die Hard, one of the bad people were Russian. Anyway, they always talk in Russian among themselves, and I can always identify who actually is a Russian speaker and who isn't. And the reason I usually can identify it, and other people as well, is once again because of that sensitive period we were talking about in the previous video. So I've been learning Russian since that was my what we were going over. Those were my cooing and babbling stages, the single word stage, the telegraphic speech. All of those I've been doing in Russian since I was a baby. So for me to say different Russian words is much easier, for example, but then my friend is trying to learn a few words or something like that here and there, and you can totally tell that their accent is a little bit different. Similarly, you can hear that my English is not as potentially clear and that definitely I have an accent. And that's because I studied learning English in third grade, I believe, either second or third grade. So in Israel, we add on another language that early on. Once again, because of the sensitive period that we catch it a little bit, right? When do you turn 7, 8? When you're in second, third grade. So you might be able to, sound a little bit better. But I believe that I will probably most likely never sound and speak without an accent at all. But it shouldn't discourage you from learning different languages. What happens when there is no exposure to language, when the person is a baby? Jeannie, she was born in 1957 and it's a pseudonym for a feral child who was a victim of extraordinary severe abuse, neglect, and social isolation. When Jeannie was a baby, her father, for some reason, decided that she was severely mentally retarded, which made him dislike her and withhold his care and attention. Around the age of 20 months, Jeannie's father decided to isolate her as much as possible. So starting the age of 20 months till she reached 13 years and 7 months, he kept her locked, alone, in a room. During that time, she was almost always strapped to her child's toilet or bound in her crib with her arms and legs completely immobilized. And he left her very malnourished. Because of Jeannie's isolation, she was not exposed to any significant amount of speech, and as a result, she did not acquire any language during childhood. So, after she was found in that house when she was 13 years old and 7 months, do you think her language was she able to learn as a child who just, going through the cooing and the babbling stages? Would she be able to catch up to the point where she can communicate and you cannot tell that there was no language exposure for 13 years? Well, they ran some tests on her brain, and they found there is a persistent discrepancies between the areas that are responsible for language and other cognitive processing between her and other children her age. Though this case is extremely sad, it allowed researchers researching language to go further into looking into the processes that controls language acquisition skills and linguistic development. If you're interested in hearing and more about this story, I attached a YouTube link to the full documentary, which is like, I think 15 minutes or something like that. If you're interested in going over it or something like that. It also tells what happened to her at the end and whether she was able to. It shows different clips of her, and it's very interesting to see the way that she speaks, and the way she communicates with her caregivers. Let's move to cognitive development. So Piaget developed this theory of cognitive development, and according to him, there are 4 stages of this cognitive development. The sensory-motor stage, which is going approximately between since birth till the age of 2, and during this stage, there is a lack of object preeminence, which is understanding that objects continue to exist when they're out of sight. So for example, if you're playing peekaboo with a child, or you perhaps take a toy put it in front of the child and then hide it from the child. If the child is between the age of 0 and 2 years old, the child will believe that the object stopped existing because it's not in their vision, in their point of vision anymore. The next stage is the pre-operational stage, and it lasts between the age of 2 and 7. During this stage, the child engages in intuitive thinking that makes little or no use of reasoning and logic, believing, for example, that the sun and the moon follow you when you walk or drive in the car. Well, hopefully not the child, but when they're in the back seat. And also this example you can see in the picture. So what happens here? You sit a child that haven't reached the age of 7 yet and show them 2 beakers that are the same size and have the same amount of water in both of them. Then you take one of the beakers and pour the water into a longer, taller one, and then you set it in front of the child. Which beaker has more water in it? Hopefully, all of you said both of them have the same amount of water. However, children between the age of 2 and 7 usually, most often, point to this one. Even though they saw that both of them had the same water, the same amount of water, the pouring of it, this looks like it has more water in it. The next stage is the concrete operational stage. It's between the ages of 7 and 11. And during this stage, children become able to use concepts of time, space, volume, and numbers, but in ways that remain very simplified and concrete rather than abstract. During the final stage, the formal operational stage, which goes from 11 years and up, it's the period of intellectual development characterized by thinking that includes abstract, theoretical, and hypothetical ideas. Today, according to learning theories, children continuously gain specific knowledge. It's not that, okay, so today is your 7th birthday, congratulations, now you have moved to the concrete operational stage. That's not how it works. It's more a fluid movement from one stage to the other. And I'm about to run out of time, so I'm gonna finish this slide in another video.